I would say stage things based on, learning from your peers in your local area. What are the areas where things are growing? And then make sure you have on hand the amount of cash that can support things through any sort of slump that you might experience. And then have at least enough on hand for like that slow time.
Hello. Welcome to today's session of Selling the Couch. I hope you're doing well, having an incredible day. I'm recording this in mid-December 2024, so we're getting ready for the holiday season, and I'm going to be taking a couple of weeks off actually from STC. We've got some travel planned. Mainly just kind of focusing on self-care and rest. And we've got our online course mastermind launch that's happening from mid-January to mid-February. So our next cohort of colleagues who will be creating their online courses. So if you're interested in that, definitely keep a eye out, whether it's connecting with me on LinkedIn or joining our newsletter, which is over at sellingthecouch.com/newsletter. But today's podcast the topic is uncomfortable truths about private practice finances. This is an episode that I've been wanting to do for a long time. And it's mainly because I feel like sometimes in the private practice space, private practice is often seen as this like golden goose that if you just get into private practice, it's going to be great. Everything's going to be great. Like everything's going to be nice and smooth. And, with STC, so, one of the things that I have now learned that doing this for 9 years, which crazy, 10 years when, it'll be year 10 when this episode releases. And I just realized, man, there's a lot more nuances there than that. That everything is not always like amazing, that businesses don't always just keep going up, and that there are things that are like legit stressful. And I'm joined today by James Childress. James and I actually connected this year at the Mental Health Marketing Conference. And James is a CPA by profession. His website is cacadvisors.com. Most, if not all of his practice is focused on working with therapists. And so James has such an interesting perspective on private practice, but from a numbers perspective. And that's what we're talking about. And so we cover a range of things, but like kind of a bookend to it is I asked James to kind of share the top three emerging trends or the uncomfortable aspects of private practice. So, for example, one of them, and I'll just share one of them, which is making sure that the external environment of your private practice matches the internal environment. So this is both in terms of like how your practice is getting built out, but also the internal of what structures are there internally for you, like emotionally, but also internally within your private practice to be able to accommodate that growth. Often, I think what happens is for clinicians is they have this unexpected growth and they realize they don't have the infrastructure or the systems to be able to handle that growth, and that inevitably then leads to burnout or resentment, or just not doing as good work. Or if you're in a group practice, like high turnover among clinicians. If you're in a solo practice, maybe more clients like, don't show up or they discontinue with you. I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation. I think it's going to open your eyes to some of the realities of business ownership and private practice. Here's my conversation with James Childress from cacadvisors.com. Hey, James, welcome to Selling the Couch.
Oh, thanks, Melvin, for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh my gosh. First of all, I'm so glad like we finally got to meet at Mental Health Marketing Conference. And this year, and I like thoroughly enjoyed our lunch. That was some good tacos.
No doubt.
Yeah. What was it? The puffy taco, which I've never actually heard of, which is
that place was awesome. That venue for the conference was exceptional because there was food everywhere, but then good food. Yeah, so that taco place was awesome.
Yeah, it was. And if y'all are listening, it's the Factory in Franklin, Tennessee. Shout out to them. And I liked it because you could go to the, like, it's almost like a conference venue, a coffee shop, and like a restaurant scene, or like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
WeWork like combined together basically.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it was such a cool vibe, and I loved it because you could like totally go to the session, but you could step out and just like grab coffee or grab a meal with
Hmm.
somebody, and we got to do that. I'm so thankful for that. We're talking about something. I told you online. I was like, I think I want to do something called "Uncomfortable Truths About Private Practice Finances."
Yeah.
And I thought, like, just based on our conversation, you're a CPA by training, and you work with a lot of private practices, solo practices, group practices. And I feel like we've never done an episode where it's just like talking about the numbers, but not like in a, this is going to be a horrible episode, like don't listen,
Uh-huh.
but more of
Yeah.
like, like what are like profit margins in private practice? What are things that therapists don't talk about? That kind of stuff.
Sure.
So I'm
Yeah.
really looking forward to like our conversation, and yeah, appreciate you.
Yeah. I'm excited. Yeah. Let's dig in.
Um, I I don't know. When I was thinking about this, like I told you, like, hey, like let's maybe think about like kind of top three
Okay.
interesting things that therapists don't talk about. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
but even before we jump too much into that, I feel like broadly, I feel like many therapists go from a traditional employer, and there's like some sort of like discontentment or misalignment with that
Hmm.
employer, and that
Right.
kind of has them jumping into private practice, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Is that broadly like a pattern that you've seen as well?
It's true, and so I guess there's a couple things I typically see operating. One, they're working for an employer, and they just feel like this vibe is not working for me. There's like they don't align with the mission, so to speak. Like some of them, and it can be like in a positive light or a negative light. They're like, I don't think the practices here are the types of things I want to support, or it could just be, hey, I want to focus in a certain niche, or I really want to pursue the independence of having my own practice, or sort of the adventure of being an entrepreneur. And especially if you haven't done it before, it can sometimes look maybe a little bit more appealing than those who've been through the experience. But certainly at the start, there's like, hey, this is something I want to tackle. I want to do this on my own. I want to have my own thing, and that is kind of the American, dream, so to speak, is to sort of carve something out for yourself and make it happen. And so yeah, I think there's a lot of things that can be attractive, from every side of it. Whether it's a positive thing that sends them, zooming off in a different direction, or something that they are actually displeased with. I think both can exist. So yeah.
Thank you for saying all of that. And I think even broadly, I've noticed another pattern, which is I feel like some therapists, when they decide to go into private practice, they're like, burn the ships down. I'm going all in, like quit my
Uh-huh.
job, like going in next week, doing all
Yeah.
the, set up LLC, like bank accounts, like set up my, online directory profile, whatever, right? And then there's
Yep.
like other therapists that will be like a lot more like, okay, I think I want to do this maybe in the next year. Let me like
Hmm.
build out like an income, like a backlog of income, save set
Yeah.
aside some savings. Broadly again, like what are you sort of seeing like pattern wise among therapists?
Yeah. In terms of what they're what
Yeah, like
what they're
how they
doing and
jump
how they
in.
approach
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. I see a lot of the solos that we've worked with who are starting. They're often supported by a spouse, right, income, so they're not sort of the lone ranger as you might sort of imagine it all the time. But the ones who aren't, or the ones who are a little bit more prudent and kind of conscientious or careful, they're going to sort of bank things up a little bit. They want to sort of see that flywheel start to move a little bit before they sort of commit. And I think that's appropriate. It's like they say in project management, everything takes longer than you expect. And it really, really does. It takes more time. It takes more money. It takes more attention. You just don't know until you're in it, sometimes. And so I really recommend getting a good, strong foundation and really sort of reassessing that foundation before you sort of make any big changes, because that's really important. You don't know until you're in it what some of the pitfalls are. And there's a list on that front. So
we'll definitely talk about some of those pitfalls. This is a really silly question, but broadly, do you have like a recommendation of like how much income to kind of have in a backlog, like as somebody starts a private practice? Like for example, like if you're working, I don't know, like in an agency, like a 3-month cushion or something like that, because I would imagine for most people, you're not going to have a full caseload within like 1 or 2 months, you know?
You won't. Yeah. And that is one of the things that I think is most important to figure out is actually that caseload growth and sort of what it takes to get that caseload growing, because that is what gives you that number, right? So if you get a sense that you can create a certain amount of increase in inquiries over a certain period of time with a certain amount of either hustle or cash, you sort of get that sense, okay, this is predictable. I can do sort of a conservative view of this. But if I were to kind of answer that in terms of like a number, it would depend on the time of year, right? Because we are in a somewhat seasonal profession, a seasonal service industry. It varies depending on the state. It varies depending on the demographic they're serving, the diagnoses they tend to work with more, and the modalities. But there tends to be, kind of a drop in December. It's not retail. Retail goes up in December. We tend to go down as everyone's out shopping or, visiting with family or whatever. And then the summer is often kind of a reliable, slow point. So I would say stage things based on, learning from your peers in your local area. What are the areas where things are growing? And then make sure you have on hand the amount of cash that can support things through any sort of slump that you might experience, and then have at least enough on hand for like that slow time. So let's say it's summer. That is typically the slowest time before you kick things off. I would try to kick that private practice off during a time when things are going to grow, which typically is January through May is when we see a big rally. Sometimes, there's a good section in the fall where it rallies as well, but then also have, the cash on hand to support a slow season in case you don't really see, so, in case you're just kind of maintaining through that first kind of busy period and sort of getting your bearings. So if we had to throw out a number, it might be like 3 months of, personal expenses, but, the better your foundation you have, the less risk you have. And so it's mostly, kind of gauging that. And, some of the challenge we find in being an entrepreneur is taking our enthusiastic foot from the gas to the brake, slowing things down a little bit. That can be kind of the hard part, is taking your time when you really, really don't want to.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. And then also, like, thank you for normalizing the time, like when to start. I think I broadly understood that, but I've never heard it like someone put it into those words. So thank you for that. I mean, there's like the underlying thing is, it's not just about starting a private practice, right? There's some like business strategy that you got to really think about, also like, I don't know, for whatever reason, let's say, for example, you are locked into starting your private practice in the summer, like not being so hard on yourself, realizing like broadly private practices do have a summer slump,
Yeah. And, when we're savvy business owners and entrepreneurs, so let me back this up by someone authoritative. So I'm a big fan of William Edwards Deming, and I use his principles in a lot of the things I do. And he's largely credited with, being responsible, or at least a main instigator for the Japanese economic miracle, which is basically where Japan in 20 to 30 years went from total destruction after World War II to being the third largest economic superpower. So anyway, I talk about Deming all the time. My team members really get tired of it, but one of the things he advocated was data-based decisions. And he famously said, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And, that cuts through the noise, for a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners, but going with your gut is when it comes to business, it can often be somewhat overrated. There's some value to that in certain instances, but you want to pair that with as much data as possible. And often when we think about data, we sort of lump it in this category of like huge spreadsheets of statistics and stuff, but it's just sort of what you see and what you know. And so when you think about launching a private practice or a business of any type, you really want this thing to succeed. And think about that in the big picture. Don't think about necessarily, you want to think about the potential, but don't bank on the potential. Fight for the potential and go with what you can expect, which is what you can expect is there will be some surprises, some things you don't expect, and there will be some challenges that you didn't expect. And you want to have as strong a foundation as possible. You want to eliminate as much risk in that endeavor as possible so you can have the highest likelihood of success. Not just, success in a time frame, but success period, right? So that's where those things come in. Like what's going on in your local area? Is it oversaturated, undersaturated? Is there a specific, segment that you feel like you could serve better, where you might have a better likelihood of success? Like, just what are all the things you can kind of extrapolate and pull from what you know and what you see? Use it, don't ignore it, but use it. And that will create a stronger foundation. That foundation can be cash, it can be resources, it can be skills, but it also can be, that data. Like, what do I see in the market? What is going on around me? And how can I pursue this endeavor with the highest likelihood of success? Not necessarily speed, but highest likelihood of success.
How do these are as a silly question, but like, how do you find like local data like that? Like, is it just broadly like looking on like an online directory? Like, what are trends that are happening in your local area? Is it just how would a therapist go about finding that information?
Yeah. So, you can join, local associations like counseling associations, psychology associations. They're typically governed by state. You can develop your own peer group by finding people on LinkedIn that you sort of mesh with, asking questions and sort of just navigating that space, finding a mentor, someone who you maybe there's a sort of competitive pairing. Like, let's say you find someone who their focus is really like anxiety and depression, and your focus is ADHD, or just they're in an area that you're not in. Buddy up. Create a peer group of the two of you, share your notes and see if you can support each other, right? So all those things can be, research. I'm using air quotes for the people who are listening, but that can be research, right? And data. It sounds like we're just having a chat and we're having a conversation, which of course we are, but you're learning great things about your market. You're building a network, you're gaining resources, and it's amazing the way just having someone you can sort of tap into, a small group that you're connected with, the level of support you can get from that, because you can avoid a complete disaster by someone just sharing something, one 1 minute conversation saying, oh, no, go left instead of right. And it can be immensely valuable. And so, that's another thing. And again, I'm trying to, for someone who's starting a private practice like that, that's something you can do that doesn't cost a lot of money, right? It just sort of takes some time and sort of takes some networking and sort of building some relationships, creating some trust with some people that are in your area. Doesn't cost you much money, maybe a cup of coffee, like we were talking about at that conference, but it can really be invaluable when you find yourself sort of in a pickle facing a surprise or a challenge you didn't expect.
Yeah. So. I mean, it's that thing of like private practice is both about the ambition side of it, but it's also like the humility side of it. Like, and this, like you said, the image was fantastic. Like knowing when to push the gas and knowing when to press the brake, when most of you in the initial stages, most of us like want to just pedal to the metal, like, and go. And there can be so much wisdom in learning like, oh, wow, that would have been a really not good path. Like it may have been okay for now, but I didn't think about that. The repercussions of that, like 3-5 years from now.
Yeah. It's amazing someone who's been and done the things they can share that we don't necessarily see at the start.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
absolutely. James, I wanted to shift over to kind of the crux of our conversation. Again, we titled this Uncomfortable Truths About Private Practice Finances. And let's even start like one at a time.
Okay.
What would be like, and broadly, it's like the top kind of three emerging trends that you're seeing when it comes to private practice finances. So this isn't even like when somebody's just starting, but even somebody that's like an established solo practitioner or, a group practitioner as well. Let's just start wherever you want to start and we can dive deep in. So
The biggest trends in private practice finance?
or biggest trends or like uncomfortable truths, whatever, however you want.
Sure. Yeah. One of the things that I've seen in the work that we've been doing, I also like to kind of share, before I share uncomfortable truths or potentially get into the side of things that's somewhat critical. I think it's important to share. I come to this from my own personal experience in therapy, and I found it transformative. And I admire therapists immensely because I was able to find answers I wasn't able to find anywhere else. And so I'm definitely an advocate for therapists. And so I'd like to just throw that out as a preface before I say anything that could verge on this on the area of being critical, is because I want private practice to succeed. But that being said, one of the biggest things I see is, especially when group practices start, there's a size of group practice that is inherently unstable. And what I mean by that is that most clinicians are going to go to a group practice because they don't want to do all the things. And so there's going to be a demand for the admin side, the billing side, marketing side, et cetera, to be handled by the practice itself. And there's a stage, and this is kind of the stressor. Like a lot of people talk about quotas and having to hit session counts and all these other types of things. Sort of the nucleus of that is that sort of operator. It's sort of that mechanism, and I'm always a big fan of like, let's get to the thing that's sort of black and white inside of it all that makes it clear. What's going on there is the clinicians want all those things to be off their plate so they can just practice and they can just serve their patients. Well, in turn, if the practice is not sizable enough to support all of those things, then basically what happens is everyone inside that practice is like bootstrapping, right? The resources are kind of slim, and the ability to provide that thing that the clinicians are wanting and needing is less and less. And then also the owner is now doing a group practice. They're trying to get this thing off the ground. Sort of everyone is feeling kind of this scarcity and sort of stringent operation of things. It's important to know that that's a phase that we need to pass through. And that's the uncomfortable truth. The uncomfortable truth is there's sort of a set point where the juice is kind of worth the squeeze, so to speak, where there's enough going on. And like I saw this pretty clearly. I was presenting at APA in Seattle, and I was talking about net income percentages, and the average in the industry is 14%. And I mentioned that to someone, and they said, "Oh man, that's not enough. I don't know why I would do this for 14%." And I was like, "Well, what is that 14% applied to? Is it applied to 100,000? Is it applied to 2 million?" And the question is like, if all we have left is a small number, it's not going to be incentivizing. And so, what we have to advocate then is we have to advocate getting past a stage where there's just not enough to go around and just not enough to make it worthwhile. And that's that sort of bootstrapping phase where every other business out there is going to try to get past it. Or they're in that spot where they're in this role where they're wearing every single hat and they're doing all of the different things. And now that practice owner feels like they're not owning a practice, the practice is owning them. And it gets very, very laborious and tedious. And the real problem that happens then is they start to resent that practice. They start to feel like, oh man, why did I do this? And that's a real shame. So like that I'm a real advocate for that. They have to get past those stages where it's really scarce, really stringent, really, really tight. They have to fight to get past those stages and make as many really, really good decisions along that track. And if possible, make it as short a journey as possible, by really acknowledging what they're after. And so that's that first one, is sort of the bootstrapping practice thing. It's a little bit hard to think about there being this stage where everyone's sort of in the same boat, and it's no one's exactly at that point getting what they're really wanting out of this. So,
what's a common thing that like a group practice at that stage is doing that kind of keeps them stuck at that stage?
Yeah. So what I'll often see is the practice owner will hire admin staff, and they're often overstaffed on the admin side because they're trying to meet a demand that they see in the rest of the practice, right? And so that creates sort of this imbalance. And this is where we talk about balancing and benchmarking, all this type of stuff. People think it's just a bunch of, numbers and things, but really there's a balance. There's a balance between the amount we can invest in sort of the admin team, however size that is, and we want to keep them highly accountable and productive to all the results they're working on, and so that we preserve that capital, not just for the clinicians but also for the marketing to continue our growth track, and also all the other things that go into making sure that the inside of the practice is growing as much as the outside of the practice. Like, so the outside is going to be that base of customers and everything that are the patients that are coming to that practice for all the help. The inside is going to be that structure and foundation, like we talked about, that makes sure that all those resources are coming to bear and everyone inside the practice is getting what they need. So that's the big thing I see. I was talking with one practitioner, and she, just as an example, she had 5 providers in her practice, and she had 5 admin people. And what she was hearing from the admin people was she was hearing that they were just overwhelmed with work. Well, he shouldn't have 5 providers and 5 admin. That's a little out of balance. And she was feeling it. She was feeling it in the pocketbook, and things weren't going well. And so that's the typical thing. Like, be very, very clear on the admin side of that practice. That's got to be one of the most efficiently run things you've ever seen. It's got to be tight. It's got to be very, very efficient. And there's got to be some really, really strong accountability between the practice owner and all of those admin supporters. They really, really need to produce and be effective, so that the space that the clinicians are operating in can be the right space and they can do all their work. So.
As therapists, we manage so many roles in private practice, from being a clinician to a business owner to doing all the things that we need to do to market our practice. It's really easy for all of us to feel overwhelmed, especially when we are juggling so many things. That's where the team at Alma comes in. This is a platform that I would consider, if you are a solo practitioner that is either wants to take insurance or that is private pay, but just wants to hedge a little bit, especially to account for periods of economic uncertainty or weird things like hyperinflation, like we've been dealing with in more recent times. Alma makes it easier than ever to build a thriving private practice. They include a bunch of different cool stuff. So one is they have a members-only platform where you can exchange resources with other clinicians, exchange referrals, and just find support. They have consultation groups as well. And they also offer CEUs as part of your membership at no additional cost. These are both live and on demand. Now, in order to get credentialed with Alma, typically to get credentialed with insurance, it takes months and months, but Alma actually has a 45-day credentialing process, and you actually get increased reimbursement rates. So they're often higher than if you were to go just through the insurance carrier and if you were just to apply as a solo practitioner. And the really cool thing is they guarantee payback within 2 weeks of when you see the client, so that you can ensure your income stays steady. You can see as few as like 1 client or 2 clients just to hedge a little bit. And Alma also has a HIPAA compliant telehealth platform so that everything is safe and secure. Alma also has a bunch of different stuff to support clinicians, all the way from workshops and all sorts of things, as well as an online directory, so that you can continue to get referrals coming your way. The best part, the team at Alma was able to hook the Selling the Couch family and listeners with a unique code, which is over at sellingthecouch.com/Alma. That's actually for 2 months, absolutely free on Alma's platform. This is a non-advertised, like non-publicly advertised discount. So definitely encourage you to check it out over at sellingthecouch.com/Alma for a 60-day free trial just to see if it makes sense for you. Is there broadly like a number, like for example, one admin per three clinicians, like anything like that? That's sort of like or does it really depend on like a type of practice, what they're doing, therapy versus assessments, like anything like that?
Yeah, it does kind of depend on what they're doing. And I can't necessarily use kind of a benchmark in terms of headcount, but what I will say is that for the clinical side of things, what we often see happening with a lot of group practices, this is maybe a little bit of an uncomfortable truth as well, is there on the admin side and the supervision side, things increase based on headcount. The demands increase based on headcount, but the revenue increases based on sessions, right? And so if we see a lot of folks coming into a group practice where on average we've got sort of a part-time, clinician base, what we're going to see is the admin and the supervisor load be really significant because they're serving all the people, but then the revenue is dictated by the sessions. And and another way I like to describe it is sometimes we'll have a situation, this is again a bugaboo about, billable sessions, but sometimes we'll see a situation where the session load is spread out over a significant number of people. And what we've done is we've traded a concern over clinician burnout for an alternative concern of supervisor burnout. Because now the supervisors are basically, their attention is spread across a head count, not necessarily a session count. And so that's sort of that balance. And so when you think about that, if we get that in check, we're not only hopefully protecting clinicians against, safety concerns and workplace concerns, but we're also protecting supervisors. We can keep things kind of nice and neat and efficient, and then have the right accountability in place for the admin team and judge that based on like their success and their progress along their tasks and the efficiency and things. The other thing I will say is and this is a very important thing, is whenever we're working with the admin team, we have to pass through a few gates for whether or not we're going to hire. And we need to make sure, one, that the admin team is doing things in the right timing. There might be things they're doing monthly that they really should only be doing quarterly or annually, like we don't actually just need that much, that's good to make a point in. And it also may be that, instead of hiring another person to do a task in a manual way, perhaps there's a software or perhaps there's an outside service. I'm a really big advocate, and we've seen this play out in the business world. Businesses that bring on external resources like experts in little areas in the business, they tend to get ahead a little bit faster as opposed to everyone sort of reinventing the wheel as they go. Billing especially is a big one for that. I'll see practices hire sort of a biller and an internal biller, one person, and that person will learn how to do all the things. I definitely appreciate people learning and everything, but when you're a small group practice, it can be very good to hire an expert, because if that billing gets behind, and I've seen it, we had a client we brought on a few months ago, they had 4 years of billing that wasn't collected. 4 years. And it was just because it was like, hey, they hired someone and that person did their best. And, I don't necessarily think anyone was nefarious, but it was like, we're in a pickle, and hopefully we would have, in the all best scenarios, we would have seen this sooner,
Yeah. Thanks for, noting that one. What's another kind of uncomfortable truth or emerging trend that you've seen?
I think one of the big things I like to advocate, and it's a little bit bittersweet, but I think therapists really, really need to succeed. And I mean that like in every area. Like the real truth is they've got to want it all. They've got to want it all. They've got to want to serve their patients really, really well. They've got to want to make good money. They've got to want to have a very efficient business. They've got to want to have an excellent brand that pulls people in. They've got to want demonstrable results with their patients. They actually need to have it all. And I say that because, we're heading into this space where the stigma is subsiding. or I mean, well, subsiding is still subsiding, and diagnoses are increasing, and people are facing challenges. But in turn, people are also realizing, hey, I can just get help with this. Like, I don't have to be a wreck. Again, I'm using air quotes. I don't have to be a wreck to talk to a therapist and get this incredible experience of the objective experience of someone who can help me understand myself. It's amazing. And I think more people are starting to see that. So what we need more therapists coming into the space. And that means we have to increase these average clinician incomes. We have to improve those outcomes. They have to be doing better. Like because we have to make it attractive. And this is the big mistake that my profession made. 75% of the CPAs that were working in 2010 have retired by now. They're gone, 75%. And for every 3 that were retiring, 1 was sitting for the exam, and most of them didn't pass. And then most of them, when they got in the industry, they didn't stay. And so, there's not a lot of CPAs. It's harder to find, and everyone complains about how their CPA doesn't pay any attention to them and everything like that. And that's a real issue for our profession. I'm on one of our state societies, and the discussion all the time is what they call pipeline, which is like how to get people into the profession. And I'm the one who always says, hey, wouldn't it help if they got paid more? And it's like, but it's not just one problem. Like, you can't just sort of chop a tree down and fix everybody's pay. It's systemic, and it's like it's lots and lots of little levers that we have to pull to make all these things run right. We've got to make sure, like in private practice, we got to make sure cash flow is good and billing's good, and we're adjusting our average revenue rate, and things are growing at a decent clip, and we know what our future is going to be. We know what our past was. Like, we can make really confident decisions, moving our foot from the gas to the brake, or the brake to get to the gas. So that's kind of that uncomfortable truth, is they really have to want it all. Otherwise, I think in 5 to 10 years, we're all going to be really frustrated because the status of these group practices isn't going to be really what we want, and we're not going to be seeing a lot of people flocking to this as a profession where they can serve others and indeed also serve themselves.
Man, that's so fascinating how you phrase that. Like, because in the moment you're just thinking about like sustaining a practice, whether it's solo or group.
Yeah.
But we're not like thinking about the ripple effects. Like, what is that? Like the downstream effects of the actions that we do now, and how can it impact like perception of the field, future earning potential, all of that. That's really fascinating. You said something, what's like a normal rate of growth, like healthy growth for like a solo group practice? Again, I could imagine this probably depends on the area, type of clients, like, I don't know. So I guess that's like one part. I have a second part, but I'll let you answer that first part. So
sure. Yeah. So I would first say that, balanced growth is essential, right? External growth and internal growth. But it's not uncommon for a practice to double within 2 years if the right things are in place. I mean, what we've seen with everything after COVID and with the climate around mental health changing, growth can happen relatively quickly. So producing good outcomes, having patients, be satisfied, and having all the right connections be out there, and building your referral network, you can have the incoming, requests and everything. And that's really what we're after is to take advantage of this, but take advantage of this in the right way. Because the thing I'm a big advocate of as well is I think clinicians should supervise clinicians. And because, I've been in the therapy session, and I understand compassion fatigue as a patient and sympathetic trauma as a patient. I've gotten to the end of a session and being like, are you actually going to go talk to someone else now? Like, you've got to be kidding me, but, you guys have your ways of managing that and everything. But I don't think that people who aren't clinicians understand that space and that experience. It's almost like, when you think about it, it's from my perspective, again, as a patient, but it's more intimate than even like the most complex surgery, because the emotions that are involved are actually experienced by both parties. And that's challenging. I see it as challenging. And so I think it's very important that clinicians be supervised, led, and managed by clinicians. And that is why this is important. And I was thinking about all the like interesting things I thought would be worth sharing. So I apologize if I'm rambling, but
no,
that's part of it, I think, is that, that clinicians leading clinicians is really what we're after. And the biggest kind of ripple effect we're trying to create is we want people who are entirely outside of this profession to sort of have their ears perk up and say, oh, wait, I could do that. Oh, and I could make some decent money, and I could have a great career, and I could have all those things. I could be really proud of myself at the end of the day for the work I've done, and I could have a retirement, like all the things. I mean, so we have to pave that way. We have to make that happen. So
yeah. Thank you for saying that and like normalizing all of that. I think we have our final one. What would you say is kind of a third uncomfortable truth or emerging trend when it comes to private practice?
So, and it's a little bit different than I think what most people would expect me to say. But the way I like to say it is the external environment must match the internal environment. And I try to sort of get to like basic truths. I try to not be the messenger as much as someone who's pointing to the message, but we see this like one of the best ways I think it's described is, Sam Walton, the guy who created Walmart, back when it was, less of a sort of corporate juggernaut like it is now. It was, at the original start, and a lot of these businesses that are doing well, they're doing well because they really, really serve customers. But he said there is only one boss, the customer, and they can fire everyone from the chairman on down just by spending their money someplace else. Now, as a business owner and an entrepreneur, what you realize, and this is where things get sort of tough sometimes, is you realize the external environment is full of customers that may ignore you completely, may not understand your message, may hear the message that's perfect for them and still not buy. They may show up and they may stick around a while and you'll think it's going to last and they leave. Like there's this real challenge. And this is why marketing is, so important, because the experience in the external environment of any business and a practice can be this sort of ambivalent and like transient sort of customer experience where it's like, why isn't this working? Why aren't we getting traction? Don't they know we can help them? Like all these things. And businesses that do really well ensure that the inside of the company, the internal environment matches that external environment. They can sum it up by saying things like product market fit, right? Does our product match our customer? And sometimes it has to match in ways even the customer doesn't know that they're needing this thing, right? But the internal environment has to match the external environment. That has to take place. That fit has to take place. And so the uncomfortable truth is then everything inside that internal environment has to adapt to the external environment. We are, and so sometimes like this is what happens, when I'm working with practice owners and they're talking about conversations, it'll be between sort of them and like a clinician or a supervisor or an admin person, like they're kind of experiencing a little bit of friction. The thing that sort of cuts through that noise is, what about the patient? How does this serve the patient? But how does this serve the patient as a customer, right? The uncomfortable truth then about finance is productivity is essential. Product market fit is essential. Actually, truly catering to the needs of the customer in the right way, both ethically as a provider and a practitioner, but also like business to customer. Like, how are we meeting their needs? How are we not only meeting their needs, but how are we helping them make sure they know their needs are met? Because maybe they don't know. Maybe they don't know what we had just accomplished in that session. That's why things like collaborative charting are so interesting to me and hopefully everybody. But like, that's that like nugget. And if it's not working right, if that product market fit isn't working right, we're going to lose ground. We really are going to lose ground. And it will be obvious in the financials. And we'll see a lot of patient turnover. We'll see a lot of like, clinician turnover, because we also have an internal thing, product market fit, the market of talent. What is talent needing when they come here? Not only do they want all the admin things to be taken off their plate, what else are they looking for? What else are they trying to accomplish? And what can we effectively deliver to them? So that's kind of that thing. That's just a way to think about it. And It keeps us away from looking at a big spreadsheet full of numbers and talking about all that boring stuff. But it's a very, very important challenge, making sure that we are matching. And it can be insidious sometimes. Just the little details that have the biggest impact. So,
yeah, I'm just like, the one thing I'm taking away from our conversation is one is like how many layers one has to consider. And it's not like, if you're hearing this, it's not like meant to intimidate you. It's meant to like inform you and to be thoughtful about it. Because I was even thinking about like my own like clinical journey, like, and I had like I was at a previous like group practice. I remember there was like situations where like it was like evident like we needed certain things, and certain things that seemed like basic things, but then they weren't like really willing to do that. And then there was like this huge turnover of clinicians.
yeah.
And it's such a, I don't know. I think of like us thinking about it, like made me think about like, oh yeah, probably what was happening. Like there was like this the external environment wasn't matching like the internal. And yeah, but James, I'm just so grateful for you. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Do you?
No, I mean, I could go on and on
Yeah.
about all this stuff, but yeah, yeah, that's great. And I see that too. Like, and, just as I guess one example, that's kind of interesting is, another sort of corporate juggernaut, but Amazon at its start had a lot of very good things going for it. And one of the things I think they did that was really exceptional is on all their executive meetings and the board meetings, they'd have an empty chair at the table. And that was meant to represent the customer. And it was like, let us never forget who this is supposed to serve. Because if we lose sight of that, it all goes sideways. But yeah, I just thought I'd share that because that probably was a little bit missing there, and you probably had some of those clinicians in that experience where they were like, thinking like, hey, these people need something different. This needs to operate different. I just know it needs to operate different. And in a right setting, everyone should be able to raise their hand and say, hey, this isn't working. My customer who I'm having a direct experience with, because the folks further up don't, right? So they need that input, like on the ground level, that customer interaction. How did that go? Did they get what they needed? Were they satisfied? Those things have to be shared. And if they're not, if that gap is closed, then there's no hope for those two environments to match. They'll never match up.
Yeah. Wow. James, I'm so grateful for you, grateful for our friendship, grateful for you coming on the podcast. Where can we learn more about you and the awesome work that you're doing with therapists?
Oh, yeah. Thanks so much, Melvin, for having me. Yeah, our website is cacadvisors.com. And we'd love to hear from anyone who might want to chat. No pressure. We're not boring snobs as some of our peers might be. We'd love to hear what your challenges are, see if there's any way we can support you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, James. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Melvin.
All right. Bye. Hey there. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with James, and especially if you are starting private practice or you are in private practice or you're a seasoned practitioner, whether it's a solo practice or a group practice. I hope today's session has just been really helpful for you. I was trying to think about what are my sort of big takeaways. I wanted to focus on one, the first thing that James talked about, which is realizing that there is a seasonal nature to private practice. And I would even say like most businesses probably have a seasonal nature. And so when you're first starting out, thinking through where can you start, if it's possible, right? Like when can you start the private practice in a way that helps you ride the momentum wave, right? And even if you are like established, I think one thing to really think about is if you're building on new products and services, when can you time those in relation to when there might be demand? So for example, with like our online course mastermind, there's like a legitimate reason why we launched it we have two launches. We have one in the spring or early in the year, like mid-January. And then we have one that's like end of summer into the fall. And the main reason was because we noticed that that's usually the space when clinicians are most excited and ready to create something and create a course. It didn't really make sense to do it in the summer when there's might be travel and stuff like that. Again, that's just like a personal example for STC, but it's something that I thought a lot about as James was sharing. It's not just about launching the thing, it's about like the timing of launching the thing. That's also equally important. James's website is over again at cacadvisors.com. And definitely if you have tax kind of questions and just want to get a second perspective on things, please don't hesitate to reach out to him. I've, gotten to know James online, and then obviously we shared a meal, and yeah, it's just a great vibe that I got from James. And I know he's just one of the good folks doing good work to serve our field. Have a great rest of our day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.